The participants informed me that they lost their phone at the side event in room 14 at lunchtime. So if any of you might have an unknown phone in their bag, apparently it's navy blue, please bring it to the South African delegation. So if you found a navy blue phone anywhere, please bring it to the South African delegation. Thank you.
Can I please ask you to take your seats? I'm ready to begin. We left off with document 48 and 49, and I needed some time to basically digest everything heard and the changes people had suggested, so I'm willing to make a conclusion, and I'll start with document 48. Paragraph 10 would read now with the changes: the Standing Committee agrees to take note of the report of the Animals Committee, including the recommendations in paragraph 7. B, agree that the draft decisions on intro from the sea in Annex to Document 78, Doc 49, will allow the Standing Committee to address the relevant implementation matters raised at the technical workshop on the non-detriment findings for specimens of Appendix 2 species taken from areas beyond national jurisdiction. And C, agree that decisions 19.135 to 19.1.39 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion. So I'll take any discussion. I'll look for concurrence from the Standing Committee members on these recommendations for document 48 as the conclusion. And then I have some to suggest for 49, but let's see if we can finish this one up first. So I look to the Standing Committee for agreement on this summary for document 48. I'm seeing some nodding heads. More. All right, document 48 is concluded with that. And then we move on to 49, where we had more changes proposed. And so the Standing Committee agrees in A, to take note of the report provided by the Secretariat on the implementation of Decision 19.140 on introduction from the sea. Little paragraph B, and this is where some changes have been made, so pay attention. Take note of the updated status. The Standing Committee agrees to take note of the updated status and detailed analysis of the synergies between CITES and the agreement under the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction. And here comes the change. Note that the BBNG agreement has not yet entered into force, and that not all CITES parties not all CITES parties are parties to the BBNJ agreement. So I think that addresses some of the concerns that were expressed. And then there are no changes to recommendations C, D, and E. They remain as is, and we agree to those. Then the draft decision 20AA remains the same, and so we would agree to the draft decision 20AA. And then we have decision 20BB, and this is where some changes have occurred. So the Standing Committee, the decision would now read, with the support from the Secretariat, the Standing Committee shall, little a stays the same, but we have changed the opening, I'll read A. Prepare a revision of Resolution Comp 14.6, Rev Cop 16 on introduction of the sea, with the aim to provide clarifications where required, as well as to integrate as appropriate additional elements, including and this is a change to little I. It would now read, reflection of the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, and in parentheses, the BBNJ agreement. In the preambular part, noting that the BBNJ agreement has not yet entered in force and that not all CITES parties are parties to the BBNJ agreement. And then we move to little I, and that would now read, recommendations and responses to implementation challenges noted at the technical workshop on non-detriment findings for specimens of Appendix 2 species taken from areas beyond national jurisdiction and contained in document SC 78, document 48, paragraph 7, and paragraph 8A2I. which I had heard some wanted the deletion. So that would address that. And then III and B remain the same in that draft decision. So I'm looking to the Standing Committee for concurrence on that or discussion of any of those proposed changes. I'm seeing nodding heads. I think we can accept these changes. No, I call on Israel.
Thank you, Chair. Like others, over lunch we had a chance to think a little more about this and look at it. And we have a real problem with this 20BB and doing a revision of Resolution 14.6. We think this is very premature. We have certainly a lot of problems with the agreement of BBNJ and the UNCLOS Convention. Israel is not a party to UNCLOS, and there are certain other parties to CITES who are not parties to UNCLOS for various reasons, and certainly, as you stated, BBNJ has not yet even come into account. We would propose that this goes to the COP and looks at the resolution 14.6 maybe at the COP, but we don't agree with this idea of preparing a revision of the COP of the resolution. We would propose instead that A should say prepare a revision to the guidelines that are presented to the parties on the introduction from the C website, and then you could more or less keep the other sub-paragraphs as you read them, but it would be as guidelines to the parties on IFS and not for preparing a revision of the entire resolution at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
So with that intervention, I'm now looking for the Standing Committee I'll open discussion from the Standing Committee members on whether they can support that change. Basically, we would not be looking at a revision of the resolution, but instead looking at the guidelines, and for now leave the resolution to be discussed at the COP, is my understanding from Georgia. So that's what's on the table, and I look for some discussion from Standing Committee members. I have New Zealand.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm not sure that I follow the argument of Israel. Is that this is something that's being directed for the next inter-COP period, and so the resolution wouldn't be considered until the 21st Conference of the Parties. So it's not the forthcoming Conference of the Parties. So this is sort of directing work for the next intersessional period. Thank you.
You are correct on that. This decision would be taken at COP20, and it would direct the work for the Secretariat in the intervening period to look at the resolution. So I look to others on the Standing Committee for reactions. We can go back to the original text. I've got Poland.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We support Israel, but also we would like to refer to the wording of Oceania and the EU as presented on the previous session. Thank you.
I'm sorry, the chair's sort of forgetful. Can maybe the EU remind me of what, I knew they had made changes to document 48, but what specifically, how they wanted to word this decision then? Give you a chance to look at your notes and call on Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I would strongly concur with what New Zealand was saying. So we are not now asking any development of a resolution. We are asking the COP whether they are ready and agree to do so. So the discussion will be at the COP, and they will tell if we should revise that resolution. So I would support that it stays as it is now. Thank you.
I have the Russian Federation. I hadn't opened up to parties, but I will allow this one because I see the EU is still coming back to me with a solution. So I will go to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam. With regard to 20BB, we would support statement by Israel as a possibility. And with regard to 20BBAI, we would still want the deletion of that particular point because it is premature at this stage to discuss the content of the resolution. It is up to the COP, and we should leave it to the COP rather than state what should be reflected where in a potential document. So let's leave it to the COP for everyone's discussion. Thanks.
So I would like to repeat what Switzerland had said, because the chair agrees that this is, nothing in this decision is binding. The COPs have to take this decision, and this is sort of trying to have the COP decide what the work would be done between COP 20 and COP 21 on this particular issue. So it's not making a decision at COP 20. It is just a decision that the COP could decide, do they even want to do this? But I see the EU is ready, so the UK is asking for the floor. I'll go to the UK and then go back to the EU.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we support the comments of New Zealand and of Switzerland and really what you've just summarised. Yeah, we think this is something that's going to go to COP20, and then for that intersessional period will be discussed and go to COP21 for consideration. So yeah, nothing substantive is going to be discussed before then. Thank you, Chair.
I have Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. We also support the Switzerland comment. Thank you.
Does if the EU wants to speak again, I need you to press your button, Poland.
So we can support Israel in working on the guidance instead of revision of the resolution, and we agree with the rest of the conclusions as summarized by you. Thank you.
Why can't we just say prepare? Point of clarification, when you talk about the guidelines, are you referring to the annex of the resolution?
Yes, thank you. I was referring to working on the guidance instead of revising of the resolution. And for the basis of working on this guidance, we meant guidance on the website.
I have Panama.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We support the EU and Israel on this. Thank you.
I have Israel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Maybe as a way forward, just to help sort of sum up, it could be possible then to send to the Standing Committee, instead of the instruction to prepare a revision, that the Standing Committee could look at the need for a revision. And at the same time, there could be a direction that at this stage already, the Secretariat will start looking at revising the guidelines on the website. So I'm not sure of the exact wording of how you want to do that in A, but that might be a way forward so we can move on.
Thank you, Israel, for that solution. I think we could make E to be consider the need for a revision of the resolution Comp 14.6 on introduction from the sea, with the aim to provide clarifications if needed, as well as to integrate as appropriate additional elements, including, and then the rest could stay as I read out before. And based on the discussion, it also would mean a minor change to C, which we had agreed to, 20 AAC, where we would now also add a little D that would say, consider the guidelines on the CITES website. So that captures that. So 20 AA would have, I'll have another little D that says, consider the guidelines on the CITES website. And, oh, okay, I'll put an and there. All right, let me read out 20 AA. It's, okay. I'll move back to 20 BB, and basically that would say, consider the need to revise Resolution Comp 14.6 on introduction from the sea, with the aim to provide clarifications if needed, as well as to integrate as appropriate additional elements, including, and then we have the little I, little double I, triple I, and B. I think that captures the discussion that I just heard, and I'm seeing nodding heads. So can we accept that? Okay, I think we've reached a compromise and we've accepted that. Thank you. Would now like to move on to document 33.2, the expedited application of Article 13 for West African rosewood, Pterocarpus anaceus. Nope. 32. Okay, I'll try again. Moving on to document 32.2 on the revised guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual reports. and guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual illegal trade reports. And I call on the Secretariat to introduce this document.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This document proposes additions to the guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual trade reports and to the annual illegal trade reports, specifically additional explanations for the following trade terms: body, carving ivory, worked ivory, and powder. In addition, I want to draw your attention to a new section that we're proposing on reporting on specimens taken from areas beyond national jurisdiction. The Secretariat is aware that this reporting is quite complex and technical and would like to hear from the Standing Committee and from parties, especially those parties that report on introduction from the sea, whether they have been able to review this new section, they are ready to approve it with minor edits at this meeting, or whether they would need more time to consider it. So we would be grateful for feedback on this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I open up the floor for discussion by the Standing Committee of this document. I see Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to the specific instructions for reporting on specimens taken from area beyond the national jurisdiction in the document, Annex 1 of document 32.2, in some cases, specimens are the mixture of the specimen taken from EZ and those taken from ABNJ. For example, ABNJ. For example, when it comes to medicines or eye drops containing a few milligrams of ingredient extracted from CITES listed shark species, it is almost impossible to separate ABNJ originated product from EZ originated products. So in addition, fishing vessel often faces practical difficulty to physically separate the specimens taken from EZ from the specimens taken from ABNJ. For these cases, Japan would like to seek flexibility that source code X/W or source code XW can be available for the reporting. Therefore, Japan would like to propose an addition the following sentence to the paragraph 4A in the Annex 1 of document 32.2. I'll read the sentence. The specimens which are separable into source code X and W can be recorded as source code X/W or XW as appropriate. This flexible option should be considered to secure full implementation of these guidelines. I thank you, Chair.
I have the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the North American region. We support the inclusion of specific instructions for reporting on specimens taken from areas beyond national jurisdiction as found in Annex 1 of the document. We recommend some wording changes to the Secretariat's amendment to the explanation text for ivory carving to improve clarity as follows. Starting with the note, so worked ivory means ivory that has been carved, shaped, or processed either fully or partially, period, and then strike out, but shall not include whole tusks in any form except where the whole surface has been carved. Whole, strike out carved, pluralize tusks, should be reported as carving, ivory, IVC, and then insert only when the whole surface has been carved, comma, otherwise they should be reported as, and strike out not as tusks, and the rest remains the same. Would you like me to repeat that? Okay. So the explanation, the notes would read, worked ivory means ivory that has been carved, shaped, or processed, either fully or partially, period. Whole tusks should be reported as carving, ivory, IVC, comma, only when the whole surface has been carved, comma, otherwise they should be reported as tusks, and the rest remains the same. Also, for ivory carvings, we would point out that marjoram sets in the existing explanation text appears to be a typo and should be corrected to mahjong sets. And lastly, the North American region does not support the Secretariat's proposal to include a note for powder, as this would be the first inclusion of an annotation within the guidelines, and this blurs the distinction between a management authority's responsibility to issue CITES permits and its responsibility to report CITES trade. We further note that the intersessional work on agarwood completed by the Plans Committee will already propose improved guidance for parties concerning requirements for trade in agarwood, and therefore we believe this issue does not need to be addressed in the context of annual reporting requirements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I open the discussion to any other standing committee members. I open it to observer parties. I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. The UK supports the proposed amendments to the annual illegal trade report guidelines, but we've got one proposed amendment relating to dried seahorses. We think an amendment is needed to clarify the advice from the Animals Committee regarding how to record seahorse trade in annual reports. Paragraph 3 in SC 78 Doc 32.2 on seahorses makes reference that dried seahorses are reported in weight, but this is not reflected in the table provided. So for consistency and clarity, we propose that the word dried is included before seahorses in the explanation for body. Thank you.
Observer parties, non-government observer organizations. And then I'm not seeing any more requests. I will consult with the Secretariat. We've heard changes from the North American region, the UK, and Japan. So I'm hearing we can, basically the summary, I've not heard anyone non-supportive of those changes, so I think that we can, Standing Committee can agree to, trying to conclude this. The Standing Committee agrees to approve the amendments to the guidelines, and with the amendments also heard here in plenary from Japan, the North American region, and the UK. Sorry. Okay, I now had a request from UNEP WCMC, and I will ask them to speak so we can get that, since they have to deal with the database. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry for the delay in requesting the floor. With regards to Japan's proposal for the flexibility in the source code reporting, the CITES trade database currently only displays one source code. There could be some issues in terms of processing of the data if there is reporting of multiple codes. So I think this might be something that needs further consideration. Thank you.
All right, I need somebody to help me. Okay, I've been instructed Japan in consultation on this one that it has to be an either or. You can't use both. Japan, if you wish to speak, press your button, please.
There is a case where source code is OU, so those are two characters.
Okay, I'll come back to you because I had the U.S. also asking for the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States recommends that Japan consult with the Secretariat on the feasibility of having two source codes and bring it back to a future meeting for discussion.
Thank you for that solution. Is that acceptable to Japan?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretariat and Japan acceptable. But please specifically refer the such contents in the guidance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Japan. I think we can conclude this one then. And move on to the next document, 60, Trade in Stony Corals, Decision 19.178. And I turn to the Working Group Chair. The Animals Committee Chair. I'm having a rough time this afternoon.
Thank you, Chair. At COP19, parties adopted a set of decisions directed to the Animals Committee and Standing Committee with the aim to provide advice on revising Resolution Conf 11.10 on trade in stony corals, make recommendations as necessary to revise the guidelines for the preparation and submission of annual reports, and provide advice on conversion factors used to analyze trade in stony corals. AC32, AC33, as well as an intersessional working group addressed these mandates and came up with proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 11.10 in Annex 1 to the present document, Resolution Conf 9.6, Annex 4 of the present document, as well as on the guidelines for the preparation and submission of annual reports in Annex 2 of the document. It also came up with a new set of decisions as contained in Annex 3 of the present document. So the Standing Committee is invited to consider proposing the amendments to Resolution Conf 11.10 in Annex 1 to this document and the consequential amendments to Resolution Conf 9.6 in Annex 4 for the consideration at the 20th meeting of the Conference of Parties. B. Agree to the amendments to the guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual reports and the guidelines for the preparation and submission of the CITES annual illegal trade report as outlined in Annex 2 to this document. And finally, consider proposing to revise draft decisions in Annex 3 to this document for consideration at COP20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I now open the floor to the Standing Committee members on this. We're looking at the recommendations in paragraph 10, of which there are many. I have New Zealand.
Oceania thanks the Animals Committee for the preparation of this paper. We support recommendations 10A and 10B. Regarding recommendation 10C, we propose that any further work on annual report guidelines be directed to the Standing Committee. Because these matters relate to permitting and reporting, we consider this work can be most effectively completed by management authorities. Therefore, we propose replacing the text currently under draft decision 19.178 with the text currently under draft decision 19.177A. After the paragraph currently under decision 19.177A, which we are proposing to move, we propose an addition of the sentence, the Standing Committee shall report their findings to the 21st meeting of the Conference of the Parties. The inclusion of coral reef nations and experts, such as industry groups, academia, and NGOs, is vital to understand the current trade in coral and the impacts and efficacy of any proposed changes to the guidelines. We propose that references to coral reef nations and experts are retained in both decisions. So the sentence and, comma, in consultation with coral reef nations and coral reef experts, comma, would be included in both decisions. Hope that's clear enough. I can read the draft decisions if needed.
Thank you. Let me consult with the Secretariat if they've captured all these edits.
So are they talking about the new A or the old A?
Can you please repeat it? And I guess the question is, are you talking about the old A or the new proposed A?
So what I'm proposing is that the old A is moved under 19.178. So it would read, the Standing Committee shall, taking into account the progress made at AC 33 and, comma, in consultation with coral reef nations and coral reef experts, comma, make further recommendations as necessary and so forth. Oh, it's a new.
Can I ask you to repeat it in its entirety? Because there is some confusion.
Apologies. Would it be helpful if I just read the two decisions that we're proposing out loud? They're very brief. So
I think that would be helpful.
Directed to the Animals Committee, 19.177, RevCop 20, the Animals Committee shall consider the information in the annex to document AC 33, Doc 24, and, in consultation with coral reef nations and coral reef experts, provide advice on the conversion factors used to analyze trade in corals for the CITES review of significant trade process, and report to the 21st meeting of the Conference of the Parties. So that is the only decision under, and followed by directed to the Standing Committee, 19.178, RevCop 20. The Standing Committee shall, taking into account the progress made at AC 33 and in consultation with coral reef nations and coral reef experts, make further recommendations as necessary to revise the guidelines for the preparation and submission of CITES annual reports and guidelines for the preparation and submission of the CITES annual illegal trade report to ensure that they provide sufficient clarity on the use of appropriate terms and units for trade in stony corals. The Standing Committee shall report their findings to the 21st meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Is that clear?
I think we have it now. I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. Deliberations are now, I think, in their 4th year and have been extensive and as well as constructive, and the UK remains supportive of amendments that add clarity. And as such, we support the amendments to ResConf 1110 in Annex 1 and the consequential amendments in ResConf 9.6 in Annex 4 for consideration at COP20. We agree to the amendments to the annual trade and illegal trade reporting guidelines presented in Annex 2, and we also agree to the submission of the revised draft decisions in Annex 3 to COP20, and as amended by New Zealand just now. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the North American region, we support the proposed amendments to Resolution Conf 11.10, RevCop 15 on trade in stony corals outlined in Annex 1 to this document, and the consequential amendments to Resolution Conf 9.6, RevCop 19 on trade in readily recognizable parts and derivatives in Annex 4 to this document for consideration at COP20. The North American region would like to propose an additional draft amendment to the definition of live coral in the annex of Resolution Conf 11.10, RevCop 15, to improve consistency in the interpretation and implementation of what quantity 1 specimen means for live corals. The proposed amendment is as follows. Live coral, pieces of live coral transported in water and that are identifiable to the level of species or genus. Inserting, a piece of live coral is a fragment of the hard, stony skeleton that can be artificially or naturally attached to a base consisting of natural or synthetic material. When multiple coral pieces are attached to a single base, comma, each piece is regarded as an individual specimen. E.g., one base with two pieces attached are considered 2 specimens, comma, regardless of whether they belong to the same species. Would you like me to repeat?
That, I think, is quite a lot. And so, yeah, and hopefully you've given it to the interpreters that the Secretariat really needs clarity on this.
Okay, it was, yes.
Could you point exactly where in the document, again, that you're making this change?
Yes, in the definition for live coral. So inserting a piece of live coral, after what is originally there, a piece of live coral.
Excuse me, You have it? Okay. Sorry, they now have found the definition in the annex, so. Go ahead and read it.
So ending at species or genus, inserting a piece of live coral is a fragment of the hard, stony skeleton that can be artificially or naturally attached to a base consisting of natural or synthetic material, period. When multiple coral pieces are attached to a single base, each piece is regarded as an individual specimen, parentheses, e.g., one base with two pieces attached are considered two specimens, end parentheses, regardless of whether they belong to the same species. The North American region is concerned about this issue which has been brought to us by the U.S. law enforcement officers that have encountered this in the field.
I think we've captured it. I'll move on to observer parties. I will move on, not seeing. I have the U.S. again, but yeah, essence of time, I'll move on to observer organizations. I have the European Pet Organization.
Thank you for allowing me the floor. I'm also speaking on behalf of a number of other pet trade and keeping organizations whose names I will provide to the Secretariat. We support the intervention by Oceania Region, given the need of further work by the Standing Committee on the resolution relating to trade in stony corals. We highlight that a further intersessional process is needed to review this topic, as the current changes drafted to the resolution do not reflect the current nature of live coral trade and will create significant challenges for both traders and law enforcement. Thank you, Chair.
I have the U.S. again. This will really be the last time, and then I'm going to try to summarize this up.
Thank you, Chair, and our apologies. Speaking on behalf of the North American region, we do have 2 additional draft decisions to propose that focus on collecting feedback of the proposed changes for consideration. They have been provided to the Secretariat, but if you would like me to read them now, I will.
Both.
Okay, I'm getting advice here. I think that given the changes that have been proposed by the U.S., even though the Secretariat has had it, I feel that the rest of the Standing Committee members have really had problems capturing all of this and wanting to make an informed decision. I guess I am going to ask for a COM document, and unfortunately we'll come back to this. But could I ask the U.S. to be sure to work with the Secretariat that they've captured everything, and that way the COM document can be looked at by the Standing Committee members, because this has become a handful. All right, thank you. So now I'll move on to document 70, and I will try to do a better job on this one. These marine issues are definitely complicated for this chair. So, on the next item, document 70, Sharks and Rays, we have 70.1, which is the report of the working group, 70.2, which is the report of the Animals Committee Chair, and 70.3, which is the report of the Secretariat. I am going to take all 3 of these documents and have them introduced at once, and then our discussion will, I'll talk about that after we get them introduced. So I turn to the UK I turn to New Zealand. The US is introducing document 70.1, sorry. Sorry if I wasn't clear. I'm asking the U.S. to please introduce document 70.1, the working group report. All right, I'll move on to document 70.2, the Animals Committee Chair's report, and hopefully by then we can have document 70.1.
Thank you, Chair. At COP19, parties adopted a set of decisions on sharks and rays. This document reports on the implementation of Decision 19225 directly to the AC. It should be read in conjunction with the document prepared by the Secretariat on the implementation of Decisions 19222, 19223, and 19224 in document SC 78. Doc 70.3 and the document submitted by the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group on the implementation of Decision 19226 in document SC 78 Doc 70.1. The work of the AC has been quite extensive and the results can be found in several annexes to this document. Annex 2, recommendations relating to sharks and rays agreed by AC 33, excluding the draft decisions agreed by AC 33 for review by the Standing Committee for onward submission to the 20th meeting of the conference. Annex 3, draft decision agreed by AC 33 for review of the SC. And C, Annex 4, draft decision proposed by the Chair of the Animals Committee inviting the Secretariat to consider the feasibility of adapting the existing RSD process for sharks and rays that selects high priority species in international trade in accordance with Resolution Conf 12.8 RevCop 18 on review of significant trade in specimens of Appendix 2 species. The Standing Committee is invited to note the recommendations of the Animals Committee in Annex 2 of the document and to review and submit the draft decisions in Annexes 3 and 4 to the present document for consideration of COP20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I now turn to the USA to introduce document SC 78, document 70.1, the report of the working group.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies for before. At its 19th meeting, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 19.222 and 19.227 on sharks and rays. At the 76th meeting, the Standing Committee established an intersessional working group comprising of 35 parties, 20 observer organizations, and 2 members of the Animals Committee. The working group undertook several rounds of discussions with a concentration on the part of the mandate to review the revised rapid guide on making legal acquisition findings as found in Annex 3 of Resolution 18.7, RevCop 19, on legal acquisition findings, as they relate to trade in CITES listed shark species. Based on its discussions, the working group recommends amendments to the rapid guide, which can be found in the annex of the present document. Broadly, the amendments were aimed to provide clarification and support parties in making legal acquisition findings as related to CITES listed shark and ray species and marine species more broadly. The discussions on whether to use coastal state versus flag state formed a large part of the deliberations of this working group. Specifically, the working group discussed whether the coastal or flag state should be the exporting state in situations where a vessel of a flag state catches a CITES-listed specimen in the territorial waters or exclusive economic zone of a different state of the flag state before landing in a third state. Despite the working group's productive discussions and clarifications from the Secretariat, there was no consensus among the working groups on this matter. Therefore, the working group has presented both possible options in the annex to this document pertaining to this issue for the Standing Committee to consider. Additionally, the working group started to make progress on the part of its mandate to discuss challenges related to transport of biological samples for research and data collection purposes in the context of fisheries management, including in the context of the provisions of introduction from the sea and Resolution Comp 14.6 in consultation with the Animals Committee. A summary of the concerns expressed by the members and suggestions on a way forward can be found in the paragraphs 13 to 18 of the present document. Unfortunately, the working group was unable to complete its mandate entirely. The working group invites the Standing Committee to 1, review and submit the working group's amendments to the rapid guide to COP20, information on the experiences in implementing CITES provisions for listed shark and ray species, in particular challenges relating to permit processes. 2, encourage the Secretariat, subject to external funding, to explore opportunities for information exchange between fishery researchers, CITES permitting authorities, and CITES enforcement authorities. And lastly, review and submit draft decisions to COP20 related to the working group's recommendations and additional time needed to fulfill the aspects of the mandate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I will now turn to the Secretariat to introduce document SC 78, Doc 70.3.
Thank you, Chair. The document summarizes the progress of the implementation of decisions on sharks and rays and the recommendations directed to the Secretariat by the 33rd meeting of the Animals Committee. The Secretariat, in consultation with the Chair of the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group and the Chair of the Animals Committee, has published an addendum to the agenda item with a compilation of the draft decisions in the 3 sharks and rays documents to facilitate the discussion at this meeting. The Standing Committee is invited to take note of the progress made on the decisions, consider the responsibilities of a foreign flag vessel operating in the EEZ of a different state, consider whether the inclusion of the ENDF tool will be beneficial on the CITES website, review the draft decisions on addressing discrepancies in the CITES trade data, and consider the way forward for the inclusion of catch locations in annual reports. Thank you.
Thank you for these introductions. While reviewing these documents in preparation for this meeting, I noticed an overlap between the draft decisions in the 3 documents, and therefore found the compilation of the draft decisions in the addendum in SC 78, document 70, very helpful. It may be challenging to address these decisions one by one in each of the documents and then consolidate them in a coherent manner. So I brought this up on Monday informally to the Standing Committee members, and I now look for their thoughts. I would like to facilitate the consideration of these documents. I would ask the committee if it can be agreed that the compilation of the draft decisions in the addendum could be considered as the way forward to approach this document. So rather than discussing each individual document, we would focus our discussion on the addendum where the decisions have been basically compiled and consolidated. So I look for the committee, I guess if there's any need for a discussion of that, or basically if I can get concurrence, thumbs up, that we will work with the addendum. I'm seeing thumbs up, heads nod, we'll work with the addendum. So that said, and knowing that we are behind in our agenda, due to the scope of the recommendations and decisions, and taking into consideration our time constraints, I propose that we establish an in-session working group on sharks and rays, which will consider the recommendation in the document and the compilation of the draft decisions in the addendum. So essentially the working group's terms of reference would be to look at that addendum and come back to us with decisions. So this is, I guess I strike the working group first. Well, I'll read out what the working group mandate would be. Basically, A, review paragraphs 8 to 11 and the annex in document SC 78, document 71, and paragraph 25B of document SC 78, document 70.3 on responsibilities of a foreign flag vessel operating in the EE zone of a different state. Make recommendations on the 2 options and revise the proposed amendments to Annex 3 of Resolution Conf 18.7 Rev Cup 19. They will also review the recommendations in document 70.1, paragraph 19D, and prepare draft decisions as appropriate. C, they will review paragraph 30 in document SC 78, document 70.3 on the ENDF tool and determine if the implementation would be beneficial and make recommendations. D, review paragraphs 38 to 51 in document SC 78, document 73 on the addition of catch location to reporting requirements and make recommendations. E, revise the draft decisions in document 70 addendum as appropriate, and F, report back to the Standing Committee. So I will establish this in-session working group with the mandate that I just read out, and I would look to Oceania and the United States if they are willing to co-chair this working group. I see thumbs up, in which case I am now looking for composition to this working group, and remembering that we need a balance I first look to standing committee members to join the group, and then parties, and then observer organizations. So standing committee members wishing to join this working group, please just press your button and I'll read them out as I have them. I've got the UK, Brazil, Japan, Argentina, Ecuador, Peru, New Zealand, Australia, Spain, Panama, Mexico, Republic of Korea, the EU, the USA, Germany, China, Senegal, Canada, and I believe that's it on parties. I will now move on to non-parties organizations. Oh, I have South Africa. I have World Wildlife Fund, WCS, IUCN, ICAT, Blue Resources, Save Our Seas, FAO, Japan, and US. I'll figure out who that is in a minute. I've got the Maldives. Given the considerable interest in this working group, I've been instructed so we don't overflood the screen and confuse the chair. Basically, can I ask everyone to unpress? And then I will ask the parties only to press their buttons if they wish to be in this working group, and we'll record it, and then I'll read it out. So parties, please press your button if you wish to be in this working group. At this point, I think I have all the parties, and now I ask you to unpress the parties. No? I will give the parties another minute to press their buttons and then just leave them alone, and the Secretariat will get me to the next step.
See, it's still increasing, so the list is increasing. So now we have 20, so maybe we can say, don't touch the button.
Okay, don't touch the buttons anymore.
I'll read them out.
We got them?
Chair, we used to have 20 parties, and now we have 18. We'd just like to make sure this is the final list. Please do not push any more buttons. You will not be either added or taken out of the list anymore. We have 22 now, 21. I'm sorry, but the secretary won't be able to read out the list because it keeps moving until everybody's hands are on the table.
Please stop pressing the buttons.
Everybody put your hands on the... Okay, we have 23 parties. And as I call your party names, if you could undo the button, that would be great. So we have Israel, Germany, Republic of Korea, Gabon, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, the European Union, Canada, Ecuador, China, the Maldives, United States of America, Senegal, South Africa, Peru, UK, Brazil, New Zealand, Panama, Australia, Argentina, Japan, and Spain. Mexico just pressed the button. Chair, would you allow Mexico to be added? Thank you, Chair. Mexico.
We have Indonesia too.
Do we also have Indonesia? So that's 25 parties, Chair. Thank you.
I will stop here. We'll clean the screen, and then we will go to observer organizations. If you want to be in the working group, press your button, and we'll see how many we end up here. All right, don't touch your buttons anymore, and we'll read out the group. Oh, they're still. That's it, stop.
Hands in the air. Okay. Now we have 19 observer organizations. They are IFAW, FAO, WCS. Sorry, as I call you, it would be great if you could turn off your button. So IFAW, WCS, Global Guardian, IUCN, CMS, Florida University, ICAT, UNEP WCMC, Save Our Seas, WDC, Whales and Dolphin Conservation, SSN, WWF, Traffic, Blue Resources Trust, is it Blue Resources? Zoological Society of London, UNEP, IWMC, Japan, NUS. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
So there is balance. There are more parties than observer organizations, and so the working group is struck, and it will be co-chaired by the United States and Oceania. We will now move on to document 33.6, application of Article 13 in Ecuador and Peru. And I turn to the Secretariat to introduce the document.
Thank you, Chair. The document summarizes progress made by Ecuador and Peru in the implementation of recommendations agreed at SC 77. The Secretariat conducted a technical mission to Ecuador and Peru in September-October 2024 and analyzed the written reports provided by both countries. This document presents the Secretariat's conclusions and recommendations concerning Article 13 in Ecuador and Peru. The Standing Committee is invited to consider updated recommendations contained in paragraph 80, including a recommendation that parties continue to suspend commercial trade in specimens of sharks and rays from Ecuador for specifically Carcharanus falciformis, Alopias spp, and Isurus spp until Ecuador fully implements Article 4 of the Convention in relation to these species. An additional recommendation is addressed to Peru to ensure that its national legislation allows for the implementation of rules governing introduction from the sea. It is proposed that this case be reviewed again at SC 79. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. As with the other compliance agenda items that we discussed previously, I will give the party that is the subject of the document 5 minutes for their intervention. So I call on Ecuador.
Señora Presidenta y distinguidos.
Madam Chair, members of the Standing Committee, we would like to thank the Secretariat for document 33.6, which recognizes progress made by Ecuador with respect to the recommendations of SC 77, particularly with respect to NDFs, as well as improvements in traceability and other types of controls. We have introduced a number of different activities with coordinated activities between the administrative authority, the fishing authority, the scientific authority. This in order to improve strengthening our management of shark species, as well as improving legislation against illegal fishing and providing figures with respect to our trade with other countries. Without prejudicing any of the advances in the report, we would like to take advantage of this meeting in order to provide additional information to what is provided in paragraphs 18 and 25 of 33.6 with respect to the sustainability of our export quotas and how we deal with bycatch. It is a pleasure for us to inform you that we have carried out a process to improve our system so that we have a detailed assessment of our fishing capacity, looking at historical analyses. The Fishing Authority has been working in a cross-cutting approach which guarantees a substantial reduction in bycatch. This is based on conservation-based approach, looking at scientific data and socioeconomic issues. We are trying to work towards sustainability, economic viability, and dealing with social issues. And once these measures have been introduced, we will provide the Secretariat information on implementation and monitoring, this in keeping with paragraph 80. With respect to monitoring of our fishing activities, we have the best system in the region. We supervise 100% of the industrial fleet and all of the landings in our ports, including the artisanal fleet. And we have strong monitoring systems because we have resources provided by NGOs that are committed to marine sustainability. We have financial resources which are going to allow us to hold consultations and install 2,000 devices for satellite monitoring, which will cover the provinces of Manabí and Santa Elena. Madam Chair, we have shown in concrete fashion our commitment to shark conservation in order to ensure that we act in keeping with CITES. We have described progress made, and the Secretariat has recognized it, and we show that we are taking all of this very seriously to guarantee sustainability. We do realize that we have room for improvement, which is why we agree with the recommendations with respect to Ecuador in the document. However, we hope that there will be more cooperation and joint efforts, particularly with respect to gathering information on catches, sizes, landings, freeing and mortality of fish, and this will be in keeping with 33.6 in paragraph 80. We would like to invite parties to share information with us on size, catches, landings, which fish have been released, and what mortality figures they have with respect to the southeastern Pacific region. And we would also like to invite the Secretariat, and we'd like to thank the Secretariat and the AC chair for their recommendations and what they had to say during the meeting and in the course of what will be said in the course of this SC meeting, so that we can ensure that Ecuador continues to adopt measures which show its commitment to CITES and to shark conservation. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Ecuador. I now turn to Peru.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Madam. Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, this is the first time my delegation has taken the floor. I would like to take the opportunity, Madam Chair, to wish you every success in guiding our work. Madam Chair, Peru would like to assert its commitment to the recommendations made by CITES, and we would like to thank the Secretariat for having prepared document 33.6. It is vital to us that this document never was intended to assess the situation in Peru with respect to its CITES commitments. Its heading may perhaps be somewhat misleading with respect to our living up to our CITES obligations. That said, we would like to say that we have strengthened our legislation and have introduced very strict monitoring systems in order to ensure that we have a sustainable approach to our marine species, particularly in this instance, sharks. There is a rigorous monitoring through landing certificates, and we also have NDFs, which strengthen traceability as well as respect for legislation in force. We do feel that we need to have a strong scientific basis for our NDFs. We need to ensure that these NDFs are based on the best information available. We have over 30 shark-related NDFs, including those that are CITES appendix listed, and we need to ensure, we have ensured, that any shark fishing, harvesting is sustainable. We have devoted financial resources, and we are working along with scientific bodies and specialized agencies in order to improve the quality of the information that is used in preparing our NDFs. We have, for instance, included new indicators, and we have also introduced conversion factors that are actually in keeping with our national situation. We work with in situ research in order to ensure that these instruments are as good as possible. We recognize the challenges that we face with respect to provisions with respect to introduction from the sea. We have to bear in mind that we have the problem of having an artisanal fishing system, and we also realize that shark fishing has its own particular problems, particularly given that there is fishing outside of the national area, the EEZ. So we are committed to using the technology that will enable us to ensure that we keep a very close eye on our marine species and their harvesting. This will give us a transparent system and ensure that our fishing policy allow for sustainable fishing. We would like to stress that shark fishing in Peru is largely artisanal, and it makes a contribution to our coastal communities that depend on these resources for their survival. We would like to reassert our commitment to strengthening traceability and monitoring when it comes to sharks and rays fishing. We will continue to work in cooperation with the Republic of Ecuador. We have bilateral political systems in place in order to ensure that we manage this resource sustainably and do everything we can to ensure its conservation. Along with Ecuador, we are participating in regional conservation initiatives that ensure that we have a coordinated approach to our marine resources. This in the interest of sustainability and to work through international cooperation. We would further stress that the recent inclusion of a recent listing of a number of marine species in the CITES appendices has presented a major challenge to developing countries. This with respect to their CITES authorities. They have had to do everything to beef up their operations in a very short time, and this has significant implications with respect to not only resources but interinstitutional cooperation as well. Despite all of these challenges, we have done our very best, and we have done everything we can to ensure that we meet our treaty, our convention obligations, and we are going to ensure that we have a sustainable approach to fishing based on sustainability. In conclusion, Madam Chair, let me say that Peru is well aware of its obligations when it comes to marine biodiversity, and we will live up to our CITES obligations. We are determined to ensure that we conserve our marine biodiversity for the generations to come. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Peru. I now turn our attention from the Standing Committee members. I open the floor to them, and we are discussing the recommendations in paragraph 80A through I. I have New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. Oceania would like to thank the Secretariat for compiling this very comprehensive paper and for conducting missions to Ecuador and Peru with funding support from the United States. And also we note that it was done in cooperation with the FAO for some aspects. We recall that the CITES Secretariat and the global NGOs have conducted a number of capacity building training workshops in these countries. Ecuador and Peru have made excellent progress towards full implementation of CITES regulations with respect to the international trade of sharks. For Ecuador, some issues apparently remain on the sustainability of the proposed export quotas and the timeline and details of the implementation of the bycatch limits. And the Secretary's report urges them to conduct further work on population assessments in cooperation with Peru and regional fisheries agencies. We note in the report that there are major discrepancies in the volume of trade from Ecuador to Peru that is reported on the CITES trade database, and that reported in Table 5 of the document. CITES trade database is a really important resource, and we urge parties to accurately report trade in CITES specimens, sharks or otherwise. We note in Table 5 that over 2022 and 2023, more than 25 tonnes of dried fins of silky shark Cacharhinus falciformis were exported from Ecuador to Peru. This species is frequently taken as bycatch in purse seine fisheries, but the Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission has had a retention ban for silky sharks caught in such fisheries since the 1st of January 22. It will therefore be important to include in the forthcoming NDF and LAF for silky sharks that none caught in purse seine fisheries should be retained nor exported if they were landed accidentally. We look forward to soon seeing that sufficient further progress has been made to ensure that the international trade of CITES-listed sharks from Ecuador is both sustainable and legal, so that the current trade suspensions can be lifted. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. As Chair of the Animals Committee, I had the occasion to have quite some exchange with the authorities of Ecuador, and I would like to congratulate Ecuador on their efforts and the transparent manner they have shared all the information and their calculations to assess sustainability. We have seen many improvements and the commitment by Ecuador to make sure sustainability can be achieved by imposing size restrictions, implementing no-take zones, other restrictions, as well as a good monitoring system. In that regard, I would like to emphasize the call by Ecuador for data sharing on a regional basis to make sure that in the future they can achieve that sustainability. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I call on Poland.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We support the Secretariat's recommendations and acknowledge the progress made by Ecuador and Peru. Nonetheless, we kindly request the Secretariat and Ecuador to make available to all parties the information provided by Ecuador to the Secretariat on its mission to the country. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I now open the floor to observer parties. I have the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking on behalf of the United States applauds Ecuador and Peru with the support of the Secretariat for the progress made towards implementing the recommendations from the Standing Committee at SC 77. We are encouraged by the Secretariat's finding on the progress made so far by both Ecuador and Peru. Nevertheless, the United States notes the Secretariat's finding that additional actions were needed to ensure the sustainability of trade in CITES-listed sharks, and we support the recommendations in subparagraph B through I in paragraph 80 of SC 78 33.6. As noted in IMPDOC 32, the United States requests deferral of the Standing Committee's decision on the recommendation in subparagraph A to allow time for our current administration to familiarize itself with the ongoing works of CITES and align with any U.S. positions with the new administration's policy goals. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
I again open up the floor to observer parties. Not seeing any requests for the floor, I turn to observer organizations, and I have WCS.
Thank you, Chair. WCS notes and commends the progress made by Ecuador in the implementation of shark and ray listings as detailed in the document. However, we strongly agree with the conclusions of the Secretariat and the Animals Committee Chair in paragraph 72, mainly that full details of the sustainability of ongoing catch, whether it is targeted or defined as incidental catch, are required before the recommendation could be considered to be implemented. We agree with the recommendations in paragraph 80. We note that this document contains details of large-scale ongoing trade in species listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List, and ensuring that any continued trade in species, such as thresher or mako sharks, it must be sustainable, and that must be prioritized. And information provided by Ecuador to that end must be presented to the Standing Committee for its analysis before the current trade restrictions regarding Ecuador can be removed. Thank you, Chair.
I would like to turn back to Ecuador before I sum up, because they made two additional recommendations they suggested, and the Secretariat has them in Spanish, but I would like you to read them out again so it could be translated by the interpreter. So if you would read them slowly, your two additional recommendations you suggested.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In fact, it's just one additional recommendation which Ecuador is proposing, which is at the end of paragraph 80, and it would be D, subparagraph, that the parties share with Ecuador information related to size, capture, landings, release, and mortality of specimens of shark coming from the Southeast Pacific, data used in drawing up the NDFs. That is the only proposal that Ecuador has.
Thank you, Ecuador. That's clearer. So now I look to the Standing Committee. I sum it up. I think at first the Standing Committee takes note of the progress made by Ecuador and Peru and appreciates their efforts. And then the Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations found in paragraphs A through I with the amendment proposed by Ecuador. I'm looking for thumbs up, nodding heads. I have them, and we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you. We have two documents under the next agenda item, 33.12. 33.12.1 is a report of the Secretariat. We are on Totoaba's. Totoaba McDonald decision 18.295, Rep. Cop 19. I will call on the Secretariat to introduce their document, and then I will introduce the second document. Secretariat.
Thank you very much, Chair. The document provides an update on the implementation of COP19 decisions and SE77 recommendations on Totoabas. Reporting is provided on missions the Secretariat conducted to China, Mexico, and the United States of America, and associated findings. Reporting is also provided on the trilateral enforcement contact group between China, Mexico, and the United States, and related activities. Further, it is highlighted that the comprehensive study on Totoaba and Vaquita was completed. The study is available in Annex 7 to the document. In addition, the document outlines progress made by Mexico with the implementation of its compliance action plan on Totoaba and the associated assessments done by the Secretariat. Detailed observations and conclusions of the Secretariat are provided in Annex 9. The Secretariat, considering all matters reported upon, proposed recommendations for consideration by the Committee, presented in paragraph 35 of the document. The Secretariat also proposed new draft decisions in Annex 3 to the document for consideration by the Committee and submission to COP20. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I now turn to Mexico to introduce document 3312.2, the report of the Trilateral Enforcement Contact Group.
Gracias, señora. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mexico, as chair of the Trilateral Contact Group on law enforcement to combat the illegal trade of Totoaba, is presenting document 3312.2 as the report and the report of the group. This brief report gives details of the main progress, including the approval of the terms of reference of the group in September 2023 and its formalization on the 7th of March 2024. Its inaugural meeting was held remotely and started the exchange of information on actions taken to combat Totoaba trafficking and identified opportunities for collaboration. We would like to highlight that during the 8th Interregional Wildlife Crime Law Enforcement meeting, which was held in Cape Town in November last year, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, along with the support of the CITES Secretariat, hosted an invitation-only working group on Totoaba smuggling. At this meeting, we had the participation of the United States, China, and Mexico, and we also had participation from Interpol in a working group which was focused on exchanging best practices, cross-border cooperation, and the optimal use of the available instruments and tools. At the meeting, the parties expressed their interest and commitment to holding a next remote meeting and another in-person meeting, and they valued that it should be held in Mexico at a date to be decided. The summary of the results of the meeting in South Africa can be seen in the annex to this document. Madam Chair, we are grateful for the participation of our colleagues from the United States and China, and we thank them for the collaboration. And we invite members of the Standing Committee to take note of this report, as well as to encourage interested parties in supporting and helping us continue the trilateral efforts so that we can inform on progress at the next regular meeting of the Standing Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And so now I will open the floor for discussion to the Standing Committee members first on the recommendations in paragraph 35 of document 3312.1, and then the recommendations in paragraph 8 of 3312.2. I call on the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking as the United States appreciates the report prepared by the Secretariat. We acknowledge and appreciate the continued progress made by Mexico towards implementation of its compliance action plan. The situation in the upper Gulf of California is critical and urgent, and illegal harvest of totoaba has been a persistent problem that continues to jeopardize the survival of the vaquita, a species on the edge of extinction. Although the United States would prefer decision-making on this matter be deferred to a future meeting to allow the new administration time to ensure alignment with other ongoing lines of effort in the United States. This important conservation and enforcement issue we think is urgent and has immense gravity. Therefore, we strongly support requesting the Secretariat to continue monitoring Mexico's implementation of its compliance action plan and share the report with SC-79. The United States does not support many of the conclusions reached by the Secretariat in Annex 9 to SC-78 Doc 3312-2 on a number of milestones in the compliance action plan that have been deemed by the Secretariat as achieved. In particular, the United States has concerns regarding the Secretariat's conclusion for high-priority targets that, if actually achieved, could halt totoaba poaching and potentially avert the vaquita's demise. This includes, but is not limited to, Target 1.1, verification of all vessels, Target 2.3, monitoring the vaquita refuge area, and Target 3.5, effective criminal proceeding conducted in accordance with law. Therefore, in regards to the Secretariat's recommendation CII, the United States proposes that Mexico continue to report on all milestones in its compliance action plan to the 79th meeting of the Standing Committee. Regarding draft decisions 20AA to 20HH presented in Annex 3, the United States strongly opposes draft decision EE being directed solely to the United States. The illegal trade in totoaba involves sophisticated and organized criminal networks that span multiple countries. As indicated in the Secretariat's study on vaquita and totoaba in Annex 7 of this document, the United States is not the only transit party, as trafficking routes are constantly changing. It would be more appropriate and beneficial to all potential transit parties to strengthen information and intelligence gathering regarding individuals within its territory facilitating the transit of illegal totoaba consignments. The United States therefore recommends changing 20EE to be directed to parties affected by illegal fishing and trafficking of totoabas. The United States recommends that 20BB.
Can I ask the United States to please wrap up? Your 3 minutes has come to an end.
I understand, Chair, but the United States is a country of concern referenced in this document, and we had a mission to our territory to talk about totoaba trafficking, and I feel we should be afforded the full 5 minutes.
All right, I'll give you your 5 minutes, so you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The United States recommends that 20BB and 20EE could then be consolidated into a single draft decision. With these changes, we also recommend replacing China with destination countries in a new consolidated decision. Regarding draft decision 20GG directed to the Secretariat, we firmly believe it is vital to specify that the Secretariat should continue monitoring Mexico's implementation of its compliance action plan, and that the information received from parties in Mexico be reported to the Standing Committee in a timely manner. We'd also like to direct the Standing Committee to refer to INFDOC 40 on our recommended edits to the draft decisions, which also includes minor edits to 20BBC, 20DDH, and 20FF. We appreciate the Secretariat's thoughtful recommendations to the United States resulting from the Secretariat's mission on Totoaba. We're always open to constructive feedback on how we can be a better champion for conservation. And in regards to the report on the Trilateral Contact Enforcement Group, the United States notes the report, and we look forward to continually working with Mexico and the People's Republic of China in the framework of the Trilateral Contact Enforcement Group. We are optimistic this subgroup focused on law enforcement could significantly improve information and intelligence sharing, as well as facilitate joint actions and activities to respond and address Totoaba trafficking. Thank you.
I have Mexico on my thing. I hadn't opened up yet to observers. You did speak. Do I have any other Standing Committee members wishing to speak now? All right, then I will turn to Mexico.
Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair. In reference to document 3312-1, as was requested at the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee, Mexico provided the CITES Secretariat in due time and form the most recent report of progress and results of the action plan on Totoaba in its 7 action lines. We welcome and thank the Secretariat for the report with the recognition of progress made in Mexico with its action plan, and we express our agreement with the recommendations contained in paragraph 35 of the report, including those to continue carrying out the actions set out in the action plan, which are of a regular or permanent nature, to take into account the observations included in Annex 9 and the reports on the missions carried out, and to send a previous report before the next meeting of the Standing Committee, focusing only on the aspects that the Secretariat identified as requiring greater progress. We are committed to dealing with these issues, and we welcome the recognition of the co-responsibility and the importance of cooperation between China, the United States of America, and Mexico. Madam Chair, Mexico, through the Intergovernmental Group for Sustainability in the Upper Gulf of California, works for the protection of the vaquita amongst the different authorities in a technical manner and in application of the law, and thinking on a social and humanitarian point of view. As the Secretariat report, Mexico has satisfactorily met 80 of the actions, and we are continuing and completing the remaining ones. We have been able to see that the acoustic detection of vaquita has changed its tendency from one of diminution to a trend of stabilization over the last 4 years. In 2024, we had the highest value over the previous 8 years. And this is added to the sighting of a juvenile specimen, 1 year old, during an observation cruise in 2024, and the sighting of 2 young specimens in the previous year. These findings fill us with optimism and make us know and to share with you that we must redouble our efforts, because those results are congruent with the important reduction in landings with vessels that come into the areas where the vaquita are. In the zero tolerance zone, in the number of vessels detected by the radar of the Marine were reduced from 171 to 4. That is a reduction of 97.6%. For subjects that are still under process, there are new progresses which date after the submission of the report, and there is a route map for their full fulfillment, which include the system for surveillance, which has already been installed and which is functioning at 100% and with a reach of 25 kilometers. Progress in the new process for updating the fishers plan, which from 2024 reaches 50% of those with permits in the community of San Felipe. The continuation of the work of the Marine Secretariat, which was started in 2023 to put legal vessels and ensure they carry a security hologram, and to ensure that smaller vessels are also covered, and a greater integration on a national level to increase the sanctions for those who commit environmental crimes, and to align our national frameworks with international frameworks for sustainable fishing, and allowing the Secretariat of the Navy to carry out the inspections and sanctions in the area of fisheries. This will also allow the same Secretariat to be able to put into place the operation for the system of satellite monitoring of smaller fishing vessels. Another parallel action that we are looking into are productive alternative activities that are sustainable and that will prevent the disturbance of the vaquita and will allow new livelihoods for the fishing communities. And this includes the continual work on sustainable fishing gear. The next fishing season for the Corvina Golfina will allow us to have a new form of a lamp net, which is being provided with support from FAO. And it's essential that amongst the transit and destination countries.
Your 5 minutes.
Muy bien. Very well, I'm nearly at the end, Madam Chair. That is why we look on with positive and great optimism the trilateral group's work, and we invite other countries and organizations to collaborate on the subject, because we know that illegal trade in wildlife is a complex problem which affects all countries. And finally, we'd like to say we thank the Secretariat, the parties and the organizations who have expressed their recognition and intentions to collaborate insofar as possible, so that we can advance in meeting the CITES objectives with regulation and development that is human and environmental. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now turn the floor to China. If they wish to speak on this, they're one of the 3 countries. So if China wishes to speak, they too have 5 minutes before I open up the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. China would like to provide a brief update on our progress following the Secretariat visit in July 2024. The 2 plans have been implemented. They are: 1, the action plan on combating illegal trade in Totoaba, and 2, the work plan on curbing illegal demand for Totoaba. Numerous initiatives have been undertaken by various units within these frameworks. First, we have conducted 9 special enforcement operations specifically targeting trafficking in Totoaba. The second, China has implemented strict supervision in both physical and online markets. Third, we have actually actively collaborated in TCG with Mexico, the US, and other related countries to establish new intelligence sharing channels with Interpol and the UNODC. Fourth, China continues to implement demand reduction strategies, including awareness campaigns and educational programs in partnership with associations and NGOs. China is pleased to report that under sustained enforcement pressure, illegal cases involving Totoaba have consistently shown a steady decline. Additionally, we have submitted Information Document 11, which comprehensively details China's efforts in combating illegal trade in Totoaba. If appreciated, this document would serve as the report of China as referenced in the Secretary's recommendations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I will now open the floor to Standing Committee members, and I have Brazil.
Thank you very much. Brazil would like to congratulate the progress made by the three countries on this, especially the progress made by Mexico on the conservation of Totoaba. We fully support the recommendation in paragraph 35 of document 33.12.1. And we also encourage the parties to continue to collaborate with a view of to conservation of the Totoaba. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm looking if there are any other requests from Standing Committee members. I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. The UK recognises the complexity and the challenges involved with implementing the Compliance Action Plan and therefore welcomes the progress that has been made by Mexico. Clearly, following discussions, we do have a note that a number of the actions in the plan have passed their deadline, and we strongly encourage Mexico to expedite their implementation as a matter of urgency and priority. We do also welcome the update provided in document 33.12.2 on the establishment and progression of the Trilateral Enforcement Contact Group, and urge the continuation of these efforts. We feel it's important that efforts to tackle the demand and use side of the illegal trade are as effective as and supportive of the extensive elements of the action plan aimed at preventing the illegal take of the species. Thank you.
I have Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. Along with others, we would like to appreciate the works of the contract groups, and we wish the three parties continue their work further. Thank you.
I open the floor to observer parties. I have Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Canada would like to thank the Secretariat for its detailed report and acknowledges the critical work being undertaken to address the illegal trade of Totoaba swim bladders and the threats it poses to the critically endangered vaquita. Canada also recognizes the contributions of range and consumer countries in tackling this complex issue. While the study identifies Canada as a potential transit hub for illegal trade, we confirm that there are no documented cases or records linking Totoaba trafficking to Canada in recent years. However, Canada remains vigilant and recognizes the risks posed by transnational trafficking networks. Canada is committed to ensuring that our ports and our trade systems are not exploited for illicit activities and will continue to act on credible information to address any potential cases. Canada broadly supports the recommendations outlined in the report. However, we would like to emphasize that efforts within this forum should remain focused on CITES mandate and CITES-specific priorities, including regulating the trade of CITES-listed species. By maintaining this focus, we can complement the broader work conducted through other international efforts, including, in this case, the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have the EU.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The European Union and its member states take note of the information provided in documents SC 78, 33.12.1 and 33.12.2 and their annexes, and support the Secretariat's recommendations. We want to commend Mexico for its efforts to implement its compliance action plan on Totoaba. We also want to recognize the efforts made by Mexico, China, and the US to control illegal trafficking of Totoaba. These efforts are essential to protect the critically endangered vaquita. Given that vaquita is on the verge of extinction, we encourage Mexico, China, and the United States, as well as other parties, to step up efforts to address illegal fishing of Totoaba in the northern Gulf of California, as well as clamping down on illegal trafficking of Totoaba swim bladder, including by addressing consumer demand. Thank you very much.
I open the floor to observer organizations. Okay, I have several. I am cognizant we're way behind time, so rather than your 2 minutes, I'm basically going to ask you to try to speak in 1 minute, and possibly some of these organizations I think might be in alignment, so I will try to separate them out, but hope you can align some of your interventions. I will call on IUCN first.
Thank you, Chair. The IUCN SEC Cetacean Specialist Group welcomes the recent progress made on vaquita conservation and Mexico's compliance action plan on Totoaba, reported on document 33.12.1. However, critical concerns persist regarding the transition to alternative fishing gear and effective vessel monitoring with the vaquita range, both of which are essential for the species survival. While 90% reduction of illegal fishing within the zero tolerance area is commendable, and the Navy's land-based radar is a positive step, real-time tracking of fishing vessels activity remains crucial. Without comprehensive vessel monitoring, persisting illegal fishing in the vaquita refuge, where vaquitas have been recently detected, will continue, and the species decline will not be effectively prevented. Urgent action is needed, and I underline, to implement alternative fishing gear that is missing and enhance enforcement efficiency throughout the vaquita refuge. This presents an important opportunity to showcase positive action towards the conservation of the vaquita.
Can I ask you to please wrap up?
Yeah, and sustainable fisheries. Thank you.
I have Sea Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sea Shepherd and the Mexican government partner in Operation Vaquita Defense. After more than 10 years, 2023 and 2024 saw a historic reduction of 90% in illegal fishing activity in the zero tolerance area of the Vaquita Refuge. Sea Shepherd collaborates with the Mexican Navy to monitor, detect, and collect information on illegal fishing activities in the Vaquita Refuge. Sea Shepherd ships, crews, working with the Mexican Navy, have removed more than 1,200 pieces of illegal fishing gear from the refuge to date. In 2025, Sea Shepherd will add additional assets, including vessels and drones, to patrol the Vaquita Refuge. Sea Shepherd will continue to conduct and support Vaquita acoustic visual surveys to better define Vaquita habitat, and we will work with the Mexican government to improve and expand the acoustic array to detect vaquita, which has detected vaquita in the Vaquita Refuge. This research is critical to define areas requiring protection and ensuring the effective conservation of this critically endangered species. We respectfully request that the Secretariat continue to work with the government of Mexico on its reporting and implementation of its compliance action plan.
Can I ask you to please wrap up?
Yes, ma'am. And supporting Sea Shepherd and Mexico in its efforts to end illegal Totoaba fishing and rid the vaquita habitat of gillnets. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I ask the remaining speaker to please be brief? NRDC.
Thank you, Chair. And I think other speakers dropped as we are intervening on behalf of several organizations. We welcome the new administration in Mexico and look forward to working with it to address this critical conservation matter. Nevertheless, we share the concerns of standing committee members and parties. After decades of calls for action, the vaquita remains on the brink of extinction, in part because relevant parties have not met their CITES commitments related to illegal fishing and trafficking. Thus, while we thank Mexico and Sea Shepherd Conservation Society for the progress made in reducing illegal fishing in a portion of the vaquita's habitat, the fact is that illegal fishing remains uncontrolled in large areas of the vaquita refuge, dangerously overlapping with known vaquita occurrence. This is due in part because Mexico has not met critical milestones to which it committed in its compliance action plan. As such, and especially in the context of the dire status of vaquita, we urged the Standing Committee to impose a trade suspension. However, if a party's failure to meet the commitments it made in a compliance action plan when we are on the brink of losing a CITES-listed species are insufficient for the Standing Committee to impose trade suspension, we at least urge that Mexico be subject to strict time-bound requirements to be brought into compliance or face trade suspension, and that this matter be brought to SC 79 as recommended by the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. We've had much discussion on this. I would like to consult with the Secretariat and then proceed with the way forward. So we've had quite an extensive discussion, but what I'm seeking some clarity on from Standing Committee members is that the U.S. had suggested several changes. I think the one that I would really like to get feedback on is they had suggested the deletion of 20EE directed at the United States, and if that wasn't possible, they had also suggested the consolidation of 20BB and 20EE. But first, I would like to get some thoughts from Standing Committee members, and then they had also suggested a change to 35 III. But I want to hear first from Standing Committee members if there is any support for deletion of, because I heard support for everyone in as the recommendations, all of them stood. So I see the U.S. is asking for the floor, so maybe I haven't characterized it correctly. I'll let them speak once more, but then I'm really looking to other Standing Committee members here to give me some guidance, because I've heard a great deal of support for the recommendations as a whole.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We did not call for the deletion of that decision. We wanted it to be directed to parties affected by the illegal fishing and trafficking of totoaba instead of being directed solely at the United States.
Thank you. That's clearer. So can I have some feedback on changing that? The decision would stay as written, but it would not be directed solely to the United States. It would be directed at all parties affected by illegal fishing and trafficking. I see some nods of the heads on that text and that change, at least from the UK. And then the other change by the U.S. to 20cc was, instead of it directing solely to China, it was directed to all destination countries, as was suggested in INF document 40. So it's not changing the actual recommendations, it's changing who the recommendations would go to. So 20cc would be changed to all destination countries, and 20EE would be changed to parties affected by illegal fishing and trafficking. So it broadens who this is directed to. Is that acceptable to the Standing Committee members? I see nodding of heads, so we will make that change to both of those decisions. And then the last one was, sorry. I don't think we need a consolidation of 20BB now that we've made the change to 20cc and 20EE. So I think the only remaining suggestion was 35III. And if the U.S. could clarify the change they wanted to 35III, if I got that correctly. My apologies, it's II, seeing triple. So we're looking at 35II, which was basically to have Mexico report exclusively on progress with the achievement of the milestones of targets in the compliance action plan that they have been progressed. But I heard the US say all, I'm calling on Mexico.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to the amendments proposed to decisions 20BCC and 20BEE proposed by the United States, it seems important to us that a balance be maintained between the work done as a result of missions to China and the United States. We have stressed the need to keep up the cooperation among the three parties. So it's difficult to introduce these sorts of amendments because it might undermine that tripartite cooperation. Now, I can see that we might want to involve other parties. We have a suggestion. 20cc, we would suggest that you maintain the original China and other countries as proposed by the United States. That would perhaps be a more balanced approach. And for 20EE, which is also, it would be directed to the United States and other countries of destination. That would be a more balanced approach that would strengthen the cooperation among the three countries, and particularly the trilateral group that we are involved with right now. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Mexico. If I captured your suggestion, and I know I'm trying to be balanced and fair here. So what you're suggesting to 20CC is that it would remain saying directed to China and other destination countries, and 20EE would say directed to the United States and other parties affected by illegal fishing and trafficking, leaving that open. So it's sort of a compromise that we still signal out one of the compliance countries based on the mission, and then we add this extra language. So I am really looking really seriously at other standing committee members here to give me a way forward, and I see the U.S. would like to speak one more time. I will entertain that, but then I really want to hear from the other standing committee members because we are taking quite a bit of time here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The trilateral efforts under this issue are in 20FF under the Trilateral Contact Enforcement Group, and that decision hasn't changed. What we are trying to do is update the decisions with the information that we received from the study that was done by the Secretariat. That indicated that there were other transit countries and other destination countries. And so specifically targeting and pulling out China as well as the United States, we want to make sure that all parties understand that if they are a transit country or a destination country, that these decisions apply to them.
I'll take a moment to consult with the Secretariat, but I think what Mexico is suggesting, it would say directed to China and other destination countries, so it would not be directed solely to the United States. And 20EE would say the United States and other parties affected by illegal fishing and trafficking. So it is broadened, but I will look to the Standing Committee to see which way they would like this decision directed. I have Belgium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we found the reasoning and the suggestion by Mexico reasonable, as there has been missions to the US and to China, and we feel the same, that should be reflected in the draft decisions. And we would feel that the compromise proposal by Mexico would address also the issues by the USA. So we would agree with that suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other standing committee members? I'm hesitant that I may get a vote called here, so I really would like to hear what other standing committee members have to say rather than a vote. Thank you. I woke you up. Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. Switzerland supports the vote from Mexico. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. I have New Zealand.
We support Mexico's proposal. Thank you.
I have Kuwait.
We support Mexico proposal. Thank you.
I have Panama.
Sí, señora presidenta. Panama.
Thank you. Panama supports Mexico's proposal.
I have Morocco.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morocco also supports Mexico's proposal.
I have the USA one more time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We also can support the compromise approach moving forward.
I have Honduras yet. I'll get that for the record, and then I think I can sort of conclude on some of this.
Thank you. The Central American region supports Mexico's proposal. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mexico, for that suggestion. I think we've heard from most of the Standing Committee members, and there seems to be support for your compromise text for the decisions to be directed, and the U.S. has agreed to them. So I think the only thing that I'm left with is paragraph 35, the double I on the reporting, where the U.S. wanted report on all the milestones, and basically right now it has you reporting exclusively on the progress on the achievement of the milestones in the CAP that have either progressed but not been achieved. So I asked Mexico if you've made progress on the ones you've already achieved. You may just report that they've already been achieved. So I look to you if we can have a compromise here. I'll turn to Mexico.
Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair. We would prefer to have the reports as proposed by the Secretariat. We note that the report was submitted in good time for this committee meeting. To present it ahead of time as a full report before the next meeting, it does not give us much turnaround time. Really, the most important thing to do is to review those pending activities where there has been delay, and we will work with the United States and China, the other members of the group, to provide you with a full report on all activities and to do so on a regular basis to the Standing Committee, which is to say to report next year. And we would like to have that kind of flexibility so that we can deal with those areas where we really are behind schedule. Otherwise, we really don't have enough time to do things, and we would have to do things in good time for the Standing Committee. And that means we would have to come up with a report right now when we're just reviewing a report. So we'd be grateful if the United States could be flexible on that. Thank you.
So what I hear from Mexico is that they would like to report at SC 79 on the things that are pending, and that we could expect a full report on all milestones in the CAP at SC 81. That's what Mexico is proposing, if I got it correctly. They're nodding. I now go back to the USA, and the reason I'm trying to work this out in plenary is I'm trying not to create a drafting group, another one. So I will turn to the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe as a compromise approach, we can recommend that Mexico reports on those 3 high targets that we have identified: Target 1.1, Target 2.3, and Target 3.5.
You please repeat them slowly so everyone.
Target 1.1, Target 2.3, and Target 3.5.
I'll give Mexico a minute to think about if they could add those items to what they would report on at SC 79. Can I also see if the Standing Committee has what their views are on changing little I to reflect what the U.S. has just said? I'm seeing some nods of heads, so I'm hoping we'll hear back from Mexico to give us a way forward then. Does Mexico wish to speak on this one?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the interest of consensus, we can go along with the U.S. proposal. We can cover these 3 targets, these milestones, in our short report. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Mexico, for your spirit of cooperation on these items. I truly, as chair, appreciate it. And the person who was going to have to chair the drafting group probably appreciates it even more. So with that, let me consult with the Secretariat, and then I will need to conclude what we have adopted here, or agreed to here. All right, let's see if the chair gets this right. So we've agreed to all the recommendations in paragraph 35 with an amendment to CII that Mexico would essentially, it would read focusing exclusively on the progress with achievement of the milestones of targets in the compliance action plan for which the Secretariat concluded that they either have been progressed but not achieved, or that activities have not yet progressed to achieve them in Annex 9 to document SC78, document 3312.1, and in addition, report on targets 1.1, 2.3, and 3.5. Then we have agreed to the decision, the Standing Committee agrees to decision 20AA, 20BB. Standing Committee agrees to decision 20CC, which now would be directed to China and other destination countries. Standing Committee agrees to decision 20DD. Standing Committee agrees to decision 20EE, directed to the United States of America and other parties affected by illegal trade and trafficking. Standing Committee agrees to decision 20FF as written. Standing Committee agrees to decision 20GG as written. Standing Committee agrees to 20HH as written. And then Standing Committee agrees to the recommendations in paragraph 8, the report of the Trilateral Enforcement Contact Group. The Standing Committee agrees to take note of this report, and the Standing Committee strongly welcomes, is what I heard, the trilateral efforts of Mexico, China, and the United States to combat illegal trade of totuaba, urge the continuation of these efforts, and invite the 3 parties to report at the next regular meeting of the Standing Committee on the progress of TECG. One minor correction I didn't say to 35C little II was at SC 81. If needed, Mexico will report on all the milestones. Right? Have I captured that correctly? I really want to see nodding heads on this one. I do. And we can conclude this one. Thank you. We are now on the afternoon agenda. We have about 45 minutes, 50 minutes remaining. Let's see how far we can get. The first agenda item up is document 41, marine turtles. Decision 18.217, Resolution Conf 1945. And I will turn to the UK as chair of I will turn to the U.S. Jumped ahead again. I will turn to the U.S. as the working group chair on marine turtles to introduce this document. You okay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be introducing SC 78 Doc 41 on marine turtles on behalf of the United States, chair of the Intersessional Working Group on Marine Turtles. at the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee, agreed to establish an intersessional working group on marine turtles upon its consideration of SC 78 Doc 41 on marine turtles, with a mandate to review the comprehensive study contained in information document COP 18, INF Doc 18 on the illegal and legal international trade in marine turtles and the responses to 2 notifications soliciting information on marine turtles. Identify if Resolution 19.5 on conservation of and trade in marine turtles needs to be further strengthened, and if so, proposed amendments to Resolution Comp 19.5 for consideration by the Standing Committee at its 78th meeting. The synthesis of the progress made in implementing decisions 18.210 and 18.217 on marine turtles was prepared to assist working group members with the review of the study and to identify the outstanding compliance and enforcement aspects that may need to be considered for inclusion in Resolution Comp 19.5, taking into consideration the responses to relevant notifications. Based on the synthesis and initial draft set of proposed amendments to Resolution 19.5 aimed at addressing potential gaps in compliance and enforcement relevant to marine turtles for the working group to review and provide comments. The working group provided useful feedback and helpful suggested edits to Resolution Comp 19.5 that sought to improve, further clarify, or restructure the language in the resolution. The comments were addressed and proposed revisions were incorporated. The final proposed amendments to Resolution 19.5 are shown in the annex to SC 78 Doc 41 for consideration by the Standing Committee and onward submission to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I now open up the floor. The Standing Committee is to look at the recommendations contained in paragraph 12 of the document, and I open up the floor to Standing Committee members. And I have Poland.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We thank the working group for proposing amendments to the resolution to strengthen compliance and enforcement aspects for the protection of marine turtles. We support all the proposed amendments made in the resolution. Keeping resources and capacities in mind, we would like to suggest additional wording to paragraphs 9 and 10. So the paragraph 9 would read, urges parties, as far as possible, to coordinate efforts at the regional level, and so on. And paragraph 10 urges parties, where relevant, to address the fisheries-related threats and further states as it is. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for those suggested changes. They're clear, I think, and simple wording. I will look to other Standing Committee members if they wish to speak to this. I will move on to observer parties. I have the UK.
Thank you, Chair. We recognise the need to strengthen the compliance and enforcement aspects to address the illegal trade of marine turtles, and so we welcome the proposals of the working group to address this, and we can also support the drafting suggestions from the EU. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on the USA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking on behalf of the North American region, the North American region supports the proposed amendments to Resolution Comp 19.5 on conservation and trade in marine turtles as detailed in the annex to this document. Should the committee agree to the proposed amendments to Resolution 19.5, the North American region also supports the Standing Committee's recommending to COP 20 that Decision 18.217, Rev COP 19, has been implemented and can be deleted. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that reminder on the decision. I open up the floor to observer parties, observer organizations. Not seeing any requests. I think I have heard, I can conclude on this one that the Standing Committee agrees with the recommendations. contained in the annex to document SC 78, document 41 for submission to COP20 for consideration, and the Standing Committee agrees to recommend to COP20 that decision 18.217, Rev COP19, has been implemented and can be deleted. See nodding heads, so we can conclude with that. Thank you, and with that, we move on to document 69 on, my apologies, guess I was trying to move too fast. That basically, we agree, the Standing Committee agrees in paragraph 8 to consider and agrees to the proposed amendments to Resolution Comp 19.5 on the conservation of and trade in marine turtles as presented in the annex to documents 41 and amended by the EU here in plenary for submission to COP20 for consideration. Poland. Okay. Or just as amended in the plenary. Moving on then to, and I'll try to be slower, document 69 on eels, anguilla species, decision 19.221. And first document, I'll have both of them introduced. And so the first document is 69.1, the report of the Intersessional Working Group, and this one is the UK. Thank you. Call on the UK.
Thank you, Chair. Following the decisions on anguillid eels agreed at COP19, the 77th Standing Committee agreed to form an intersessional working group to progress activities relating to eels. The working group worked collaboratively to progress well with the time available, taking into account the advice of the 33rd Animals Committee. The working group considered information provided by parties relating to the trade of anguillid eel species in response to previous notifications, including the new information provided by China, and supported the Animals Committee recommendations to propose a draft decision requesting the outstanding information sought from Cuba, Egypt, and Turkey. The working group also agreed that developing a resolution on anguillid eels would be beneficial, and that any resolution should be at genus level, given the commonalities between different anguillid eel species. The working group collaborated on a draft genus-level resolution incorporating the suggestions of working group members. This is included as Annex 2 to the document. The working group was not able to reach agreement on how to reflect the appropriateness of the ranching source code for eel aquaculture, which the Standing Committee may wish to provide advice on. The working group also postponed a decision on whether the IUCN guidelines on responsible translocation of displaced organisms would be appropriate for eels until a final version of the guidance has been published and can be considered. This ongoing activity is captured in Decision 20DDA, addressed to the Animals Committee. The conclusions of the working group are captured in the draft decisions in Annex 1 of this document and the draft genus-wide resolution in Annex 2 of this document for the Standing Committee to consider for transmission to COP20. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have document 69.2, and I will call on the Secretariat to introduce that document.
Thank you, Chair. This document provides an update on illegal trade in European eels, including an analysis of data on European eel seizures from 2018 to 2022, as reported by parties in their annual illegal trade reports, and additional information on recent enforcement operations targeting illegal trade in eels. By way of an update on paragraph B of Decision 19.221 on the feasibility of harmonising customs codes relevant to trade in all anguilla species, the World Customs Organization responded to the Secretariat with details of the 11 different codes used for eels under the harmonised system, explaining that the classification of goods under this system is determined according to the state in which the goods are presented to customs at the border. For example, live, frozen, fillets, or smoked, etc. A technical committee is responsible for this classification, and they regularly review, update and modify these HS codes to ensure that they remain aligned with global trade practices. The codes are not species-specific, but they are at the genus level. So it is not clear if it would be possible to standardise these to separate the 15 anguillid eel species at the international level. So the Standing Committee is invited to consider the recommendations presented in paragraph 22. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to now open up discussion to Standing Committee members on the recommendations in paragraph 20 of 69.1 and the recommendations in paragraph 22 of 69.2. I have Poland.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We'd like to thank the working group and its chair for their efforts. We know the document and support draft decisions in the Annex 1. We much welcome a genus-wide resolution and see it as an important way forward. Considering huge conservation concerns, ongoing trafficking, overfishing and trade pressure, we would like to suggest to strengthen the language in the resolution to adequately address illegal trade in and harvest of eels. Therefore, we suggest amending the first sentence in the second section of the draft resolution in Annex 2 to read, quotation, urges parties in which illegal harvest or trade of anguillid eel species occurs to, colon, and then end of quotation. If you wish me to repeat it, yep. So we suggest amending the first sentence in the second section of the draft resolution in Annex 2 to read, quotation, we strike out recommends and put urges instead. So it reads, urges parties in which illegal harvest or trade of anguillid eel species occurs to, colon, and the rest of the text remains as presented. End of quotation. Thank you. And the second part, as for the considerations on the use of source code R, referring to ranching, under paragraph 16 of the document, we agree with the working group. It is important to include language on ranching into the draft resolution text. In our view, source code R is not appropriate for wild harvesting specimens raised in aquaculture facilities. We suggest to refer to the existing definition of ranching as outlined in paragraph 1A of resolution conf 11.14 Rev Cop 15. We therefore proposed the following paragraph to draft resolution. Quotation. Determines that due to limited understanding of the stock recruitment relationship for anguillid eel species, source code R is not appropriate for wild harvested specimens raised in aquaculture facilities, unless there is sufficient scientific evidence that the three criteria for ranching, as defined in resolution conf 11.16, Rev Cop 15, are met. End of quotation. I can repeat.
No, let's see how the...
Okay.
Yeah, it may be good if you can tell us, I was trying to follow too. Yes, repeat and maybe exactly where it gets placed in the resolution.
It is suggested as an additional paragraph. The exact location is to be decided upon agreement on this proposal, but it should be regarded as an additional paragraph, and it would read, if I may read it once again, determines that due to limited understanding of the stock recruitment relationship for anguillid eel species, source code R ranching is not appropriate for wild harvested specimens raised in aquaculture facilities unless there is sufficient scientific evidence that 3 criteria for ranching as defined in Resolution Conf 11.16, Ref COP 15, are met. End of quotation. And Madam Chair, lastly, as for the considerations of the paragraph 17, we can support inclusion of a reference to the draft IUCN Conservation Translocation Specialist Group guidance on guidelines on responsible translocation of displaced organism under current paragraph 2 of the proposed resolution text. And as for the recommendation C, we support the deletion of decisions 19.218 to 221. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I may come back to you on the exact wording again, but I want to hear the discussion, and,
yes,
and I have a feeling there may be other suggested changes, and we'll see what the way forward is. So I now have the USA.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the North America region, we thank the chairs of the working groups and the Secretariat for these helpful reports and for their efforts on this issue. With regard to document SC78, document 69.1, concerning the draft resolution, we support the draft resolution as a whole. We do suggest some minor wording changes to the draft resolution text to make wording more precise. These suggested changes are contained in document SC78 INF 37 in English only, and we would look to the chair to advise us if you would like us to read them out or consider another way of getting them into the record. With regard to the draft decisions, we would also support the proposed text. We have 2 minor wording changes for these as well. With regard to draft decision 20.BB, we would insert the word angillid before the word eels. And concerning draft decision 20.DD, subparagraph B, delete reference to paragraph B under the draft decision 20.BB, as there is no such paragraph. We believe the implementation of the draft decisions and the draft resolution will complement efforts to regulate trade in CITES listed angillid eels. At the same time, we are confident that adopting the draft decisions and draft resolution will help advance the conservation and management of angillid eels and continue to support biologically sustainable international trade in Anguilla species. With regard to document SC78, Doc 69.2, we support noting the updates in the document and encouraging parties affected by illegal trade in eels to actively engage in any operations and targeted activities aimed at addressing the issue. And we also support agreeing that the decisions 19.218 to 19.221 can be deleted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank the authors of the 2 papers we're discussing now. Regarding draft decisions provided in Annex 1 of Doc 69.1, we propose that rather than expect parties to self-report under draft decision 20AA, a better mechanism would be to direct the Secretariat to issue a notification to the parties seeking information from parties and relevant stakeholders by a set time that fits the timetable of Animals Committee and Standing Committee meetings. And that would be reporting on the current levels of an emerging trends, etc. The new decision would then be required to direct it to the parties, inviting them to respond to the notification. And draft decision 20DD(b), directed the Animals Committee, should be amended to include consideration of responses from decision 20AA or responses to the new decision directed to the Secretariat that I've just mentioned. So currently there's no direction to the Animals Committee to look at the responses to decision 20AA. And I guess overall we prefer a genus-wide resolution on eels rather than one concentrating on European eels, but we don't think that this is necessarily the right forum to wordsmith a draft resolution. It may be better done by a drafting group of interested parties or leave it to the Conference of the Parties where they may set up a in-session working group to finalise the wording of the resolution. Thank you.
Call on Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia is speaking on behalf for the Asian regions based on our consultation this morning. We thank to the UK and then North Island and as the chair of the eel intersessional working group for preparing the draft resolutions. We support a resolution which concern the entire genus of Anguilla. However, taking into account the limited time for discussions in the working group and the fact that most Asian parties did not provide comments on the text, we believe that the consensus has not yet been reached. Therefore, we propose that Standing Committee establish a small drafting group to continue to revise the text of the resolutions, and some Asian countries would also make a comment on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I turn to Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Japan generally supports the draft resolution in Annex 2 of the document 69.1 proposed by the working group from the viewpoint of that all effort for the conservation and the management of eel stocks should be encouraged to combat illegal fishing or trade and promote further scientific activities for all eel species. With regard to the paragraph 16 of the document 69.1 on lancing, Japan understands that the views of the AC 33 captured in the paragraph 11 of the document 40 were subject to only the European eels. Therefore, Japan considers that it is premature to determine that source code R is not appropriate for all eel species taken from wild and raised in aquaculture facilities. Lastly, Chair, if there are various opinions and comments from other members, Japan thinks that the working group during this session may be established for reaching consensus. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have Kuwait.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to echo my colleague from Indonesia and also would like to support the comment made by New Zealand. Thank you.
I have a party requesting the floor, but I haven't opened up the floor yet to party observers. Sudan, thank you. So let me consult with the Secretariat because I'm cognizant of the time, and I've also heard suggestions of a small drafting group here that perhaps can work on some of this. Rather than just, as New Zealand suggested, send it to the COP, because perhaps we can get some input here from the Asian region is what I'm hearing they're requesting. So let me consult with the Secretariat if we can do that. I'm cognizant I've not opened up the floor yet to observer parties, but I'm going to suggest a way forward, and then perhaps we can have some discussion and their participation. So I'm proposing that I create an in-session drafting group on eels that would be made up of standing committee members and parties, particularly Anguilla Range states, and from the Asian region would be represented. So the terms of reference for the mandate for this working group would read as follow. The working group shall review the draft resolution in Annex 2 of the document SC 78, document 69.1, taking into account some of the discussion made here in plenary and the text of the draft decisions, taking into account the comments of Oceania, and report back to the committee at this meeting. So that would be what the drafting group would be asked to do. Do I have agreement from the standing committee that might be the way forward on this? Cognizant of the time, I would ask the U.S. to read in, probably for the record, all your information suggested changes, or bring them to the working. No. Okay, I'm reminded that that has been made available only as an information document, so I have to ask the committee, would they like the U.S. to read in those changes so that it can be discussed in the working group? For the record, I see some of the standing committee members nodding their heads, so I will call on the U.S. to read their suggested changes. Slowly.
Thank you, Chair. So these suggested amendments are found in Information Document SC 78, INF 37. So they are in the 4th preambular paragraph that begins with recognizing that well-managed angillid eel, instead of species, we would suggest replacing that with populations, so that it would read, recognizing that well-managed angillid eel populations can support, and then continuing on. In the next preambular paragraph, also beginning recognizing, we would replace species again with eel populations, and then replace that does not threaten the conservation status of with the phrase and the conservation of. And so I'll read that preambular paragraph out as we suggest it be amended. Recognizing the important role that sustainably managed angillid eel populations play in supporting the rights of Indigenous peoples, local communities, and international trade, and the conservation of angillid eel species. In the next preambular paragraph that begins with the word noting, after the reference to angillid eel, we would include the word species, so that it would be noting common threats to angillid eel species. And then we would also add the word associated before the word trade, so that it would read, noting common threats to angillid eel species, comma, including unsustainable and/or illegal fisheries and associated trade, and then continue on as written. In the operative text of the draft resolution, under paragraph 1C, we would replace the word regional fisheries with some parenthetical text that would come after the word bodies. And the parenthetical text is e.g., regional fisheries or other bodies with management authority. So that subparagraph 1C would now read, ensure appropriate monitoring of angillid eel populations, including use of fishery-dependent and fishery-independent methods, and share the results and other relevant data on the status of angillid eel populations with the appropriate bodies, parentheses, e.g., regional fisheries or other bodies with management authority, and then the paragraph would continue on as currently written.
I think the changes are, I mean, I know they're clear and concise, but they're a bit long, and so the suggestion is that you would keep those in mind and take them to the working group, and they can be discussed.
Okay. Thank you.
I have Japan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry for the second intervention. Two working groups for aquatic species for eel and for shark are established, so I'd like to avoid overlapping the timing of as much as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that important point, and the Secretariat is well aware of it, and will try not to have a conflict with the eels meeting in the same time as sharks and rays, so that everyone, many shark range states are also eel range states, so we take that into account. So do I have the Standing Committee agreeing to this intersessional drafting group? Eels. In session. In session drafting group for eels. And I would look, I have to get a chair, right? Okay, I would like to ask the UK again to chair this drafting group. And now I guess I would look for members of the drafting group from Standing Committee members. So if you could press your button.
We have 7 parties, Chair. We have 8 now. 9, 10. Please. I'd like to remind you that the Chair has called for the Standing Committee members. So if you're not a Standing Committee member, please turn off your button. Thank you. So we have 6 Standing Committee members. And as I call you, please unpress your button. United States of America, Japan, New Zealand, Poland, Dominican Republic, Morocco, and Indonesia. Sorry, the list has increased while I was reading them.
And now I'd like to open up the drafting group to the parties, with particular emphasis on parties that are a range state to eels, because this group is getting quite large for a drafting group. So press your button. Sorry.
We'll give you 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, stop. 10 parties. We have India. Please turn off your button as I call you. Canada, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, Sweden, EU, China, Russian Federation, and the Republic of Korea. Chair, Italy has also asked, would you let Italy in? And Italy.
All right, I had asked for a drafting group. It's quite large, much larger than I expected, but I hope that you can all sort of align yourself with, working with your regional representatives to get this text wordsmith. I'm reminded of what New Zealand said, that perhaps if we can't come to some consensus in the working group, the best option might be to take the resolution as is to the COP, where we can have a working group there. But let's see if we can get cognizant that we've heard from the Asian representatives that they wanted an opportunity to have input into the resolution we send to the COP. So I'm trying to make that happen with this drafting group that now is somewhat large. All right, and I have FAO requesting for the floor. I guess FAO is requesting to be in the drafting group, but my understanding drafting groups is standing committee and party observers. But I'll listen to what FAO has to say. Yeah, I'll let you have 1 minute to speak, but I've been told that you're all able to, when the document from the drafting group comes back as a document, comment on it. So don't feel like you haven't had an opportunity, but I really would like the parties to work this out. FAO.
Okay, so FAO would like to be part of the working group, but we are okay with the suggestion proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. I will keep this as a drafting group, a rather large one. Let it be an experiment if it works, and wish you the best of luck and conclude on this one. So we will have housekeeping announcements now and then adjourn to keep things on time. I see the U.S. wants to speak. Can you please be brief?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you so much. We just wanted to confirm that that the drafting group members can bring additional edits to the drafting group. Thank you.
Yeah, I assume it's not limited to the discussion here because Asia has comments and they didn't propose them. So basically, you can bring your comments and edits to the resolution, I guess the whole resolution, but that is your terms of reference, is the resolution. I think we had concurrence on the decisions with the amendments proposed. It's the resolution you need to work on in the working group.
I have a few housekeeping announcements. This evening, we have a drafting group on agenda item 60.6, Trade in Asian Elephants, which will take place in room number 13, floor level 2. The drafting group on document 61.2, implementation of paragraph 5J of resolution conf 12.10, Rev Cop 15, will take place from 6 p.m. in room 10, which is floor level 2 as well. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, there is a drafting group on document 61.1, review of resolution conf 12.10, Rev Cop 15 in room 10. So we have 61.2 this evening in room 10 and 61.1 in room 10 tomorrow morning at 8. I understand that there will be a shark working group tomorrow starting from lunchtime, but I'll make this announcement tomorrow morning. Thank you, Chair.
And with that, you're adjourned for the evening. Thank you all, and we're still behind, but hopefully we can catch up tomorrow. So thank you.